Well, hello and welcome. My name is Adam Dahlgren. I'm the VP of Product and Growth over at Allstacks. Allstacks is a predictive forecasting and risk management platform for the product and engineering organizations of software companies or companies who need to rely on software that they build or that gets built for them. I have with me today Daryl Hyde from ClearDATA, and a really important partner to Allstacks, a fascinating company, fast growing and really exciting, that's doing a lot of really cool work in accelerating digital transformation into the healthcare industry, which is a pertinent thing right now. And we're going to have a little discussion just about a series that we've been building here at Allstacks called People, Process, and Outcomes. And we've been seeing a lot of real kind of exciting data coming from the ClearDATA team inside of Allstacks in terms of how they've been able to maintain a stable, excelling product and engineering org. And we kind of wanted to tease out some best practices, have some discussions on how how Daryl in particular and his team are approaching this. And so Daryl, welcome. Thank you so much for making the time. Would love for you to introduce yourself, your background, and the company. I think it's an incredibly exciting company, and would love to hear more about what you guys are doing and how you're positioned. And then we'll get into some of the details around what we're seeing in the platform, but also just how you guys are building software in better ways right now.
Thanks, Adam. Hi, I'm Daryl Hyde. I lead product development for ClearDATA. I've been here for about 3 years and change. Prior to that, I was with hosting.com for about 14 years, the last 3 of which as Chief Technology Officer before joining ClearDATA. Overseeing our product team is a tremendous privilege. We are driving tremendous innovation to allow customers to adopt cloud technologies and cloud native principles in a way that allows them to move more quickly and adopt agile principles without putting patient health or patient data at risk, which is obviously something that is both very crucial and very personal to people under normal circumstances, but even more so in the current times.
Well, thanks again for taking the time, and it's great to have you. So we, the team at Allstacks, we've been building a kind of series of highlighting customers and partners where we've seen particular successes or in this current climate, real great stability and some process, but also just the manner in which you've built a team that you can kind of rely on in these hard times. One reason we wanted to call this out was, ClearDATA, you guys have data in the name of your company, right? I remember when we first met, the team was growing really rapidly, and you were hungry to start to understand like how you worked at a deeper level, and then to be able to do some of the forecasting and some of the other parts of our product that we'll get into a little bit later. But the sort of primary touch point that we saw early on, or centerpiece of what you guys had going on, was you were already building a remote team from very early on, right? You in particular, like you are not at headquarters, right? You're running an org across the world, and would love to start this discussion in just terms of speaking about like how have you guys gone about that from a first principles, like foundational standpoint early on, that you think has helped you now that everybody has to be remote, right?
It was never a goal. It was never a desired outcome necessarily, an end game. We were looking for to create a distributed team or to create a remote workforce, although our success in having done so obviously has made this transition significantly easier. But I think the evolution of our team, which has folks like myself that are just kind of full-time remote. I live outside of Philadelphia, and then you have folks that work in headquarters in Austin. You have folks then across every other time zone in the U.S. In our product organization. And I think that was really an outgrowth of looking for the best talent. A lot of us have long histories in and around this technology, and had great people that we've worked with that we wanted to make part of the team, and most of them weren't necessarily in Austin or in a position to move to Austin. And so we sort of made a pretty conscious decision as we started thinking about how to scale our team, that we were going to look for the right people and build a process that accommodated kind of remote first sort of accommodations. And while there are definitely upsides to the social aspects of working in an office, it is something I did for all of my career before joining ClearDATA, and there's pieces of that I miss. If you assume that no process has to depend on two people being in the same room to shake hands or both sign a piece of paper at the same time or something like that, and you kind of start from the assumption that that's not going to be an engagement model that you have, and you don't build processes that make those dependencies necessary, then suddenly when you have to adapt to this model where suddenly everybody is working in that way, it really isn't that much of a transition. One of the things that I've observed in our office when I'm in headquarters, which admittedly is largely deserted at this moment, one of the things that I've observed is that realistically, folks that are attending stand-up tend not to do so like in a traditional kind of like huddled around a conference room or something like that, because every one of our teams is kind of hybrid in terms of locale. So both folks who are in Austin who happen to be working from home that day, folks who are working from our remote office in the Bay Area, or folks that are just working from home, are all kind of attending stand-up via the same medium. They're all joining via video through Zoom, and that's kind of the way that we've always operated, regardless of where people kind of physically are operating. And it creates a kind of, for want of a better term, kind of like digital equality. Sure. You don't have like first class and second class conversations. Like the first class conversation being the thing that people in the room can talk about, and then the second class conversation being the thing that people on the phone are able to like engage in. So
right. There's no hierarchy of value because I could reach out and touch you. Yep.
Exactly. So kind of getting to sort of adopting that almost unconsciously, just because it was the way that we had to interact, made this transition relatively easy for us all to tackle, at least from a suddenly working in a distributed manner. Obviously there are any number of other factors about this kind of transition that we're all going through and dealing with, but kind of creating that sort of like level playing field that everybody can interact in the same way, share information in the same way. Nobody's pointing a camera at a whiteboard that has a projection on it. So which is, if you're a remote employee, dealing with something like that is just the worst.
Is to touch on some of the externalities that are coming into play with the shift to everybody being at home, and everybody means not just the workers but their families. Like, what are you all seeing from the employee work pattern? How the school's being closed and all that has impacted the health of the team, right? Because that's something that we care a lot about within the Allstacks platform, and would love to know what you guys have been seeing and how you're managing that.
Well, I can tell you that everybody has gotten to know my kids really, really well. I think all of us who are at home with kids who are now home full time are discovering that they're spending a lot of time on our calls. You've got to balance work life, you've got to balance ongoing education for kids, and that's one side of the spectrum. On the other side of the spectrum, we have folks who are single individuals who are just at home at a house or an apartment all day. And that is also its own kind of special challenge. So I have one-on-ones with folks throughout, every week. And one of the first questions I like to ask folks, no matter how often we talk, is, how are you dealing with the isolation? And are you finding kind of normal ways to start and stop work? Folks that are in the kind of home with kids situation kind of by definition have to find boundaries for when they start and stop work, because there are certain like imperatives that happen, like kids need a bath and people need to eat, and like there are certain things that sort of move you through the day, whereas folks who are individuals on our team who are just kind of just solo all day long, what I hear from them a lot is, I just find that I just keep working, and that's something that concerns me, and I encourage them regularly. You really take a break, go for a walk.
That's precisely the way that data starts to convey inside of the Allstacks platform. When I look at different orgs, and I can see almost like, here's one where this team is overweighted toward folks who don't have any kids and are just they're working like crazy, right? Yeah, that's great to hear that you're at least staying on top of that, right? Like managing against it actively.
Trying to.
Yeah, of course. So in terms of like process and tooling, what would you say has made, given that you were set up substantially to work well in the remote universe, what process, tooling, et cetera, have you guys relied upon, has impacted the success of the team in this last couple month period?
We're using all the same tools we were. That is to say, we're still, we still use Jira and Slack. We still use Allstacks. We still use GitLab. We use all the things that we that we would traditionally interact with. We haven't introduced any new communications tools or anything like that. And I think just by virtue of the fact that we had a pretty flexible work from home policy to begin with, you had folks that were already kind of like ready to kind of slip into that mode at home if they needed to, and that was a relatively painless transition. Zoom has been an absolute necessity for us. So consistency of all of those services is incredibly impactful. Slack had an outage last night for 3 hours, and you would think that like we had lost electricity. Suddenly like, how do we communicate? Like, what are all these other things that we have in our hands that we had before Slack?
What do I do now? I got to find a phone. Yeah.
But we've also found like, a lot more time looking at our data, because it's what's interesting is some of the sort of secondary skills you develop as somebody who just works from home constantly is, I know that so-and-so sits next to so-and-so. So if I want to talk to person A, say, oh, I can't find this person. Hey, person B, you sit next to this person. Can you go find like that kind of thing? I just can't do. But one of the things that I found is that I spent a lot more time looking at teams' Scrum boards, and kind of looking at kind of where things are going, and ultimately looking, kind of looking for impediments. I'm a strong believer that everybody who is not a developer on a Scrum team should be clearing impediments, and that goes all the way up to me and my boss, our chief product officer. If you're not a developer on the Scrum team, you should be clearing impediments. What's been kind of neat for me to see is folks beginning to rely on like virtual, like just kind of virtual social exchanges. Like, the rules of stand up are still, it's 15 minutes long. You answer the 3 questions. Like you try to keep stand up to stand up, but it's becoming increasingly common for folks to have, okay, and then we'll have some kind of semi-social kind of like hangout time after that, just to like have the conversation we might have had walking out of the meeting before or something like that.
Yeah, we have a lunch. I mean, we have a standing lunch and then Friday happy hours. But to have that be well attended for this long has been really pretty gratifying. It's like, oh, the people like to still see each other, and now we're all clamoring at this point, right, for just the extra social interaction. Yeah, I mean, I think like the highlight from the first few answers that you've had to these questions has just really been like, because you had all of this in place, it hasn't been a reflexive big swing toward any one new or any set of new processes or rituals or anything like that. Like, you've been able to rely on what was already happening. So how, like, have you made any operational changes in terms of like roadmap attainment, productivity, anything that you're looking at more closely yourself or others in the leadership team, that helps you kind of divine a little bit more detail about how things are going?
Operationally, the organization hasn't changed all that much. We, throughout ClearDATA, we're not quite as, we were not to begin with quite as immediately ready to become a totally distributed company. But even that, with our customer success team being more centered in Austin, went very, very smoothly, because you already had some of that in the DNA of the organization, and we have a passionate team that wanted to make sure that we still supported customers doing really, really important work, especially now while we went through that transition. But really, operationally, not a tremendous amount has changed. you know, what I have seen is, so I have a kind of a rule. I only use, this is super nerdy. I only use one Zoom URL for every meeting that I have. Because something that I really used to enjoy when I worked in an office was kind of like the sort of bump into each other time. You'd have like, oh, I'm leaving the conference room, you're coming in, hey, we have a 3-minute conversation, or oh, I had to ask you this thing. You are completely robbed of that when you operate in this way. But you know, I have like 2 hours of straight one-on-ones every Friday with a number of folks, and using the same Zoom bridge the entire time allows us to kind of create this sort of like kind of synthetic sort of bump into you time.
So like kind of tactically, you guys have been in really good shape, and I think that's a testament to the org that you built from years back, right? That set you up to be able to rely on. And less tactically, more maybe a little bit more strategically, and in terms of like stakeholder alignment, what people need to expect deliverables wise. You know, that's obviously a real key focus of Allstacks platform in general. It's a topic of conversation between you and me for a long time. How are you guys going about getting tighter and tighter on that front?
Well, you know, we are, as ever, and probably more so than usual, reliant on our data. I mentioned spending a lot of time myself just in Jira looking at kind of where things are, and I'm not sure how much of that is just my sort of like subconscious need to control everything, or at least feel in control of something. But nonetheless, data is really important to us, and especially right now when our customers, many of whom are on the front lines, helping to address various facets of the current pandemic. Often, you know, the features that we commit to customers often have downstream dependencies for them that are, you know, they're waiting for, that are real-time needs.
And it's important. It's important. Yeah.
It's incredibly important that when we commit to delivering a feature or some kind of enhancement to our platform within a given period of time, that we're able to do so, and more importantly, that we know that we're on track to do so, and if we're not, we can make kind of a course correction early, and that's, you know, that has made kind of our forecasting and velocity data just that much more important.
In other conversations with partners and customers of ours, has been the thing that they would otherwise be struggling with the most if they don't have a little bit of help on that front. And it's great to hear that you guys have been relying on Allstacks more, but also just like feeling like you're able to keep driving the narrative, but also the truth of how things are going and what to expect, and actually shipping the things, because your customers are, like you said, on the front lines, relying on you guys, and we are relying on them to take care of the broader world. So that's a very cool thing.
Yes, it is.
How about on the company culture side? Anything else that you are really, really focused on in terms of taking care of your people, having the balance of, you know, healthy, we talked about work-life balance, but culture-wise, what is it that you guys are falling back on, relying on right now while things are tough?
You know, that's a good question. I mean, I think the first thing that everybody has just tried to do is take a breath and realize that we're all going to be in a little bit of a gray area, especially those first kind of few weeks, kind of, you know, figuring out what our new schedules are going to be and figuring out how you know, our new work patterns are going to be. And I see folks supporting one another. I see folks in Slack helping one another all day. I see folks looking for ways that they can help unblock other folks who are working on things. And I see us doing a good job working together. One of the things that we've done internally is find, for example, ways that we can kind of prioritize handling of time-sensitive issues that have direct pandemic impact. That's something that we've been able to do, and that was kind of a company-wide communication effort to make sure that, you know, organizations that are having a direct impact on testing, organizations that are having a direct impact on supporting patients that have a real-time need from ClearData, and that we're able to identify those and be as responsive as possible. That's a mission that gets you excited every morning. That's a mission that that gets you out of bed. And I think that that's something that across our organization is really well ingrained from the top down. Our CEO, Darren Brandon, has been doing lately kind of like weekly sort of fireside style chats with the organization just to kind of talk through how things are going, what things he's seeing, and what he's hearing from customers, to kind of share that with the organization. And that's given everybody kind of a chance to kind of come together. We're a company that always did a lot of all hands activities that it's obviously a little more logistically tough to figure out right now. But yeah, I think that our mission and us being a very collaborative, kind of intentionally company, but also a very mission-driven organization, has allowed us to kind of remain focused and focus on what's important.
It's so cool. It's so cool that you guys are able to go and look at, down to like the initiative level, and hey, we're gonna bubble these certain ones to the top because they have direct frontline, exposure. That's an amazing place to be, and no kidding, like you guys are galvanized by that. That's just a really cool thing. Well, I think that wraps up like most of the questions I had for you. For those who are watching, we're gonna stay on this kind of message trend here at Allstacks with the people, process, adding up into the outcomes, and keep highlighting other partners of ours. So please stay tuned for more of this type of content. And then Daryl, if you have any call outs you want to make, by all means, would love for you to do that as we close up here.
Sure. I mean, I think as I've said a couple of times, ClearDATA is best represented by our customers. Our customers are on the front lines as payers, as providers, as pharmaceutical organizations, helping to address the current pandemic. We are simply humbly happy to be able to support them.
I love it. Keep up the good work. Really appreciate it.